We are privileged to have with us a distinguished panel of speakers who will bring their unique perspectives and experts to these discussions. Mr. Abdullah Rasheed Ahmed, former State Minister, Ministry of Education, Maldives. Andrés Chiriboga Zumárraga, former Vice Minister of Education, Ecuador. Suvojit Bagchi, Indian Correspondent, Prothom. And final Moderator, Nazmul Ahsan Kalimullah, Professor, Department of Public Administration, University of Dhaka. Please give a warm round of applause for our esteemed speaker.
Thank you very much for introducing us. I've been designated as the moderator of this session. It's a very interesting session. It's all to do with education as a pillar of democracy and human rights. And let's see how much you can learn from this interaction. We have, by now, you know, the three panelists representing three different nations of the world. And let's start with Suvojit Bagchi, our India correspondent of the most popular Bengali daily, Prothom. I reckon he's a journalist by profession and also have gone through a lot of activism. He's a Bengali from our neighboring Indian state of West Bengal and most probably from Kolkata. Yeah. So he'll be able to share his rich experience with us. Thank you.
Thanks to Chair, Professor Kalimullah, and former Minister Abdullah Rasheed Ahmed of Maldives, and former Vice Minister of Education, Ecuador, Andrés Chiriboga Zumárraga, if I'm correct with the pronunciation. So, well, as you can understand, it's for a journalist, and I have not been covering education really and more of conflict and politics. It is a very challenging task to talk about education in front of two Minister of Educations from, two parts of the world. But still, I will try my best, as I can say. Now, there is one thing mentioned in our paper, which has been a very brief synopsis of our agenda has been given. And there it is mentioned about one line, half a line is mentioned, that is India's constitution-focused school initiatives that we're going to discuss. Now, this is one thing which is not clear to me because I'm not really sure if India has a very constitution-focused school education system. Because as you know, India is a country of 1.5 billion people. Now, education is in the concurrent list, that is the state lists, and we have several states in India, provinces or states, whatever you call them, and we have the central government, which is in Delhi, and the state governments, and the state governments are very powerful in their own states. Like, as you know, in Bengal, where I come from, it is Mamata Banerjee. Some of you may be aware of her. So their politics and policies is completely opposing, And since education is in the concurrent list, where the state and the center both have a say, it is mostly controlled. The school syllabus at least, is mostly controlled by the state governments. So the state governments, for example, when I grew up in West Bengal, which has been a communist state for 34 years, from 1977 to 2011, we had read quite a bit about the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, and Lenin and Karl Marx and all that things. Now, which is the North Indian states are never communist states, so they have not studied that. So to say there is one, obviously we have all studied basics of the constitution in the sense the preamble and all that, but that's very elementary. There is no flat rule of constitution in all the schools where they teach you about nationalism or patriotism like it is in many countries, I know, or about Indian constitution. It is not, we cannot flatly say that. It's completely different. Though now we see there is an attempt to introduce certain things in Indian syllabus, school syllabus, which is, a few things about the people and the society by some education foundation. Then there is the national board which regulates the education system. And they are trying to introduce a few things, but there is a lot of debate. I mean, these are issues which never goes undebated in India because, as you know, there are so many parties, ethnicities, religion, etc. in a country that big, which possibly has the highest population now in the world. So that is my one point. And the other point is, talking about education, I mean, one thing we are increasingly feeling, at least in India and perhaps South Asia, that is the need for the basic education is primary education and strong primary education. Like I have been trying to write a book on Chinese primary education. I visited China several times, and because they have a very strong primary education. So I've stayed in a few schools there, and I've tried to study the Chinese primary education, which is fiercely strong, very robust, in the sense it is the Chinese students always kind of look for their one examination, which is the school, a competitive examination after they leave the school, and that examination is so tough to clear that everybody, if you ask students in class 2 or class 3, they will say their objective is to crack that competitive examination after I think 10th or 12th standard, after they leave the school, because once they clear that, their education, higher education, always gets hugely subsidized. It's free. But that's very difficult to crack. And only 30% of the students, broadly speaking, since I have studied a bit of primary and comparing primary education with India and China, so I found that India doesn't have a system like that. I mean, India takes everybody for their higher education. I mean, in the university, colleges, they do not get subsidies or anything, but they take everybody. But China doesn't take everybody. I mean, it's very difficult to crack that exam. I mean, of course, privately you can fund yourself, but otherwise it's difficult. So India doesn't have a system like that in first place. They take everybody for the higher education. Higher education means they go to college or the universities. But it's difficult to do that in China, what I realize. And but what I mean to say that primary education is very robust in China, and we do not have such robust primary education in unless of course you go to the elite schools, very expensive schools. But general school standard is not very robust. Now, there's a problem with that. Now, what is the problem? And this is a new problem that we are facing in India. That is when you do not have very good primary and secondary education up to class 10. You are completely these days dependent on information which is coming to you via mobile phone. I mean, WhatsApp, basically. And all these social media groups, then Instagram, then Facebook, and things like that. Now, we have already witnessed in Calcutta, where I come from, and in India, and perhaps in Bangladesh, and everywhere, even this war that is going on in Middle East, there also we witness that the power of misinformation and disinformation, it's enormous. And you can't differentiate these things unless you have primary education, and then you have some amount of education in digital literacy, which has been now started, quite a long time back, it started by Finland. And now, is the European colleges, and I know these European schools are slowly introducing this digital literacy program. Now, we in India are starting it, some of the organizations, they're facing a lot of roadblocks, like one is called Alt News, which is hugely busting the fake news and disinformation and misinformation. And we differentiate now between misinformation and disinformation, in the sense that misinformation is something which you pass, consciously or unconsciously to your group or to your social media platforms. But disinformation is something which comes from the state. And I'll give you an example. For example, the war which has been going on in the Middle East, there we find that there's a lot of information has been rolled out, like the Hamas has been shooting the children. Now, those are disinformation which has been done by the state, and even papers which are very elite papers in United States and Europe, very liberal papers, they even carried it. Some of them even carried a rejoinder saying that that was wrong information later. Now, this is disinformation. When the state is engaged in giving you wrong information consciously to build up a narrative during elections or during the wartime, or even peacetime. So that is, we see in huge amount in India, the state level disinformation. The other is misinformation, which we have recently seen in Calcutta, where that there was an uprising simultaneously going on in Bangladesh and in Calcutta, and there a lady doctor was gang raped and killed. And the whole allegation that she was gang raped, it was an allegation which was put up in the Instagram. And on basis of that information, now that information was, we do not know who has posted that, but that actually driven the movement, triggered the movement. Now after 3 months of that, all the post-mortem reports and everything has come, it was not a gang rape. It was one person who raped, and he was immediately arrested. The government was giving that version, the state government, and every other political party and everybody opposed that, saying that it is wrong. The government is giving fake information. On basis of what? On basis of our Instagram information. But now the court, now the other investigation agency saying that there was no gang rape. So this rape or gang rape narrative dominated the information space. Now, this is largely because, again, under education in the sense, again, primary, secondary, and tertiary education, and then digital literacy, lack of digital literacy, it was snowballing. So that is precisely my point, that why it is so important for us, firstly, to develop a robust primary education system, where we have been lacking substantially, especially in schools which are not expensive schools. And secondly, to bring in, if we want to fundamentally protect our human rights aspect, which is also part of, today's topic, that if we want to protect our rights, it's just not a question of human rights, it is our personal rights, everybody's rights. Then we need we need to promote this digital literacy, not just here. I mean, like it has been done in Finland, and now there are reports that Finland students in 7th or 8th standard can identify what is misinformation. And the primary thing apparently they do, and I have read several reports on that. They say that they know that what is the difference between actual news and misinformation is. In case of misinformation, one question that they need to ask is the source. What is the source? So the source identification is the most important thing about news now, because increasingly the mainstream newspapers and media is losing their ability to control the narrative. They're increasingly losing it. And in next 10 years, I don't think mainstream media will be able to control the narrative at all, the public narrative. So in this context, there's a huge significance of digital literacy, and which is not possible without very, very robust primary education, with which you need to build in the digital literacy campaign. So that's my opening remarks, and then we can go later into other aspects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Suvojit, for your thought-provoking presentation or opening remarks, whatever we say. Now, I'd like to call upon Mr. Abdullah Rasheed Ahmed, His Excellency, the former State Minister for Education, the Maldives.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning to you all. I can say this topic is very important to discuss and present different perspectives and perception. As you can see, it says the learning for liberty and education for democracy and human education as pillars. We know that without proper education, nobody will have the liberty or independent. Because without proper education, the person will not be aware of what are the rights, what are the responsibilities. Many people talk about importance of human rights, democracy, and justice. As you know, school education is still mainly focused, as my friend has mentioned, just to give knowledge or information which has really no use for 21st century. Previously, the knowledge is within the person because libraries are not common, there was no internet, therefore people should memorize the knowledge. But now it's not the case. Students don't need to memorize what are the states of India or what are the states of United States, those things. That is available in the fingertips. But now students should be equipped with 21st century skills. Just now, Mr. Suvojit mentioned about the issue in Kolkata because of the misinformation, a lot of things happen. If the community has the critical thinking skill, misinformation cannot be led because by having critical thinking, people not just believe what others say. They have to analyze it, they have to verify it, they would know that. After that, they just believe and act it. Therefore, it is important. And regarding today's topic, the aim of education for democratic citizenship and human rights, that is very important. The education for democratic citizenship and human rights aims to give people the knowledge, skills, and attitude to live effectively in the society. Without having the proper knowledge, skills, and attitude, nobody can have the liberty. As I mentioned before, if the person is not having the required skills and attitude, the person will not know whether the person has the liberty or not. Therefore, democratic education, human rights should be provided in order to empower the people. And there are certain aspects which is considered as the pillars of democracy and human rights. I can share some of these things with you. One is promote core values, meaning that education can promote values of democracy. So people should understand what are the values of democracy and what are the values of human rights and rule of law. When they are aware what is the rule of law, what are the values of democracy, then only they will know whether that exists or not. Similarly, education as a pillar of democracy prevent human rights violation. The first thing is people should understand what are the human rights. Then only they will understand when it is violated, whether it is violated by the state or the nation, or whether it is employer. So it should be taught. Then teach civic participation, which is again important. Education can teach people how to interact with others and participate in civic life, such as voting and organizing. Similarly, raise the benefit of civic participation. Education can raise the benefit of civic participation, which can increase likelihood of successful democratic revolution. There are other aspects which is considered as pillars of education for democracy. One of them is promote respect for rights and freedom. Education can promote respect for rights and freedom which is the foundation of human rights education, and support the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights explicitly states that the right education in the Article 26. Therefore, we can say the foundation of getting liberty, autonomy, independence is education. Without education, the person will not be aware of what are the rights, what are the responsibilities, what are the duties. Therefore, school education, college and university education should focus providing the required education for democracy and human rights. I can conclude for the moment. Hopefully next round I'll share more with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. You have come up with a lot of your experiences and shared your ideas. It's quite thought-provoking. Well, at this stage, I would like to call upon Andrés to give his input, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin thanking the Center for Governance Studies and his Honorable Director, Silvio Roman, for the invitation, and as well to my fellow panelists today. I would like to begin with Mr. Abdullah Rasheed Ahmed finished with Article 26 of the Universal Human Rights Declaration, and that it specifically says two things. It says it has 3 points, but it says two things that I would like to with the things I'd like to begin today. It says everyone has the right to education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. But it also says parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Freedom of choosing the kind of education to our children. And that I think that this is the starting point to educate in liberty, to learn in liberty. As Mr. Suvojit Bagchi, I hope I said it well, said a moment ago, he had an education where the state, the government says what it has to be taught. It has to be taught in the schools. And that's a problem, because it's not the best environment, the best free environment to learn about anything. You learn about what the people think you should learn. Human rights are related to the dignity of the person. Dignity implies freedom, of course, but not as a mere possibility of choosing between two more or less interesting things. That's one superficial state of liberty. Freedom is imposed as a prior and fundamental in any education program for that family and for that school. Some people identify freedom with this instinct, spontaneity, or independence. They are the same things, probably, who think that one is free if one is not responsible for anything. And that maybe has a relation with the social media subject that Mr. Suvojit Bagchi talked before. I guess to educate in liberty is necessary to attend the totality of a person. First, you have to teach a kid how to think, or what is the same, how to seek the truth. Education understood as the teaching and learning process for liberty is a very compromising issue. Great pedagogues have pointed that freedom has to be a main objective in education, but in educational practice it's far to reach it. Why? The first answer can be probably received as superficial also, as I was saying before. We are afraid of liberty. It's easy to think that. We are afraid of liberty because living in liberty supposes to assume accepting self-determination, dissension, disservity, plurality, and that's hard enough. But the second answer can reach a new depth. If we understand that education that aims to make human beings capable of formulating and carrying out their personal life project, we must recognize that this is achieved exclusively in a climate of freedom and individual in an individual and social responsibility. And of course, that social responsibility has to do with the subject we spoke before, is managing responsibly the social media, for instance. 20 years ago, we have no social media problem. We had another problem yet, is that the main media has the truth. And we can only learn about that truth from that media. We cannot know if it was fake news or not, because we don't have any access to any other news. So the youth is maybe committing some mistakes right now because the social media is new. And when we have something new, of course we are going to make mistakes as a generation and as human beings. I guess I hope that in the next years, in the next decades, we'll learn how to live with the social media, because social media came and is not leaving. So we have to learn how to live with social media and begin to educate ourselves, not just our children, but ourselves, into choosing which information is right and which information is wrong. Which persons should I follow on social media, and which probably is not the best idea to follow because the information might not be right. Like in the example Mr. Suvojit Bagchi put before, the gang rape. I don't know the case, but I guess it's a case where the people who posted it should not be followed aftermath when you know what happens. I want to finish the first round with two more ideas, small ones. But I want to point that let us not forget that the concept of freedom was formed after liberal revolutions, mainly in France and United States at the moment. So liberty living in community, not only national but international community, is a concept not yet constructed. And I think that spaces like this must build that concept. With these points, I would like to go back to the beginning. If education is the most important thing to our childhood, education in liberty is fundamental, and the parents, remember that, can choose the education for their families and for their children, then maybe the path to the freedom, to learning in liberty, in the process, is in the process and not leaving it entirely to the government. Families should be involved. Families must not let everything in the hands of the government. Education has to be public, has to be free, has to be all the principles we know about education. But the families must get involved. If not, education will not be free. Education will be what the government wants to be.
Thank you, Andrés. You have come up with new sort of dimensions and parts. So since our end time is 10:30 time, so we know about the space which is left in terms of time, so budget. So we can go for a second round, or perhaps the final round, yes. So it's the turn of Mr. Bagchi again.
See, again, education is something also which goes with the nature and the people's mind also, I guess, goes with the nature of the politics of the country and the region and the time. I mean, locally and internationally. I mean, there was, for example, a different context and a different discussion forum which I was participating. Kind of we realized that, that 30 years back, our engagement with our neighbors, for example, with India, with others, that make the borders invisible, make the borders fluid. Let's be brothers. And in 20 years or 30 years, we see it's the exactly opposite. Makes the border more strong, more robust, more militarize it. It's like that. So, the politics changes people's ideas. And now people debate why the border should be more strong. So also, if you look at the nature of our universities, that is the tertiary education, post class 12, then the medium education, the middle school education, or and the primary education. I mean, the focus at one point in time was was liberal, to hold hands with others, not to think of others as enemies primarily, but as friends. And universities were open spaces. But these days, in many countries and India especially, we find the universities to be the most closed places. And I come from a land where, as you know, the Shantiniketan was formed by Rabindranath Tagore more than 100 years ago. And he got people, the writers and poets and everybody from across the world to teach in Shantiniketan, which he said is a modern university where it is a place to mix freely, talk freely about everything. This is the place where you talk freely. You may not be able to talk outside the campus, but inside, yes. Today in the universities, you cannot. Often the vice chancellors are suspended, the professors are suspended, the departments cannot hold. I just saw in some university, I think it is something, a major Indian university could not host a talk on Palestine, which is, and the Middle East crisis. And this is not just there. It happens across, it's happening in American universities, which are still considered very liberal spaces. There are resistance to that, but it is happening. So this is also something we need to reinvent. We may not be able to talk everywhere. We may not be able to talk in the parliament. We may not be able to talk in other forums. But universities, if not the schools, the university should be kept outside politics, which is where I think I come from, that generation. And, when we have seen in India that universities were open spaces, very free spaces. These are the places of politics. It is interesting and exciting that, Bangladesh, this recent uprising, with its pluses and minuses, I think reminded us that university is the place where such dialogue can actually happen. Countering the politics of resistance should grow in the university. It may have its own issues. All movements have its own issues. But at least it started in the universities. And it told us that, such movements can be organized, orchestrated in the universities. Because increasingly we look at our nature of our syllabus, just not in India or any country I'm talking about, but it is becoming more and more nationalistic, very nationalistic. And that is not good. If you think of, again, Shantiniketan, the great Bengali book, that Ghore Baire, by Syed Mustafa Ali, writing about Afghanistan in 1920s, and Tagore sent him to Afghanistan to write a book, and he got some fellowship. And that is a great book on Afghanistan 100 years back, which even give you a perspective about Afghanistan in Bengali language 100 years ago. And such a fascinating book. I have such a fascinating book. Now, how can it, today, if you want to get a fellowship in an university from somewhere, and you want to go to Afghanistan or Pakistan to study, it is not possible. It's not, nobody's going to give you. And secondly, they will not get the visa. You will not get this, you will not get that. All kinds of roadblocks will be created. So, but then it was Tagore in Shantiniketan, which was not funded, but at least encouraged him to go and study Shantiniketan. And you went all the way from Calcutta by train up to Peshawar. It was one country, of course. So, so that way it happened. But now it is all gone. And now Well, why it has gone is another challenging question, which if we go to question answer, then maybe we can discuss that. But I'll stop that how we can reinvent and bring back that open space thing that we had in the universities. And in that, Bangladesh shows the way. I mean, that is very exciting. I mean, in a way, for us, even in Calcutta or India, it is very exciting that Bangladesh shows the way for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Suvojit, for your information. I mean, we are getting 10 minutes more as end time, so it's 10:40 instead of 10:30. So you remember that and can start, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you. When we talk about education as pillars for the democracy and human rights, the thing is, it's not just any education. Just any education cannot be the pillars of human rights and democracy. If the education system in the national curriculum or the state curriculum, how it has been designed, can only facilitate or be the education as pillars of it. If the education system doesn't provide right knowledge, attitude and skills to the students, then it will not be the pillars. Students should be taught the importance of justice, human rights, democracy, and all the fundamental principles and values of democracy. Then only it will be, education will be pillars for democracy and human rights. As we know that the term democracy comes from Greek, the meaning is of the people. Therefore, democracy is of the people and for the people. Although this is the reality, you can experience this when somebody becomes the prime minister or when somebody becomes the president or head of the nation. Then what happens? All of them, do they really believe they are for the people? Democracy is of the people? Is that how? Or they just utilize all the powers in any way they like and all the nation's resources like an unconstitutional king? We know that there are different forms of government like constitutional monarchy and unconstitutional monarchy, democracy, under democracy also presidential system and parliamentary system, all those. Then the people in the society should be very well aware what are the limitations for the head of state. What can the person do or cannot do? When somebody becomes the head of the country, and then people believe that if that person is kind, then he would give at least something for us. Even give something little also, we are very happy. If not giving also, we are okay. If the society is like that, then people can enjoy, I mean, the heads or the those who are managing or leading the country, they will misuse and finally they become dictators. If the community does not have the right education, does not have the skills, therefore, in order to make education as pillars for democracy and justice, the school education, as I mentioned before, the college education, should integrate all the core values, principles, and basic understanding of the democracy and human rights. And it's not only the knowledge which should be provided, that should be part of the curriculum, extracurricular or co-curricular, and the school and college should practice that. Before students leave the schools, before university students graduate, they should be equipped with these skills and they need to have this understanding and attitude. Then only liberty and autonomy and independent will be there in the society. There are some important sayings from some very famous people like Nelson Mandela. I'm sure you have heard about this. He said education is most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, but the right education. And Albert Einstein, he said very important saying, I quote, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because those who look and doing nothing." So we know that things are not going well, but we do nothing. Why we do nothing? Because we believe that we can't do anything. If we do something, we will be in trouble. It's better to be in the good book of the minister or good book of the prime minister or the president, then at least I'll get something from them, something little. The question is that what we really deserve, or do we really deserve more? So those things should be should come through the education, the knowledge, and also the skills and attitude. I conclude.
We can go for a final round eventually, so you may hand
Thank you very
over
much.
to Andrés.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about 2 points that my fellow panelists have spoken here. First is, in the region where I come from, in Latin America, universities have been since the 60s a place for political fight. Mainly the public universities have been very politic, and these universities has been a valid, a legitimate space for a politic conversation, a politic growth from the youth. But I would like to take that point and make it together with a point Mr. Ahmed has spoken, and that is which education, because it's not every education, it's what kind of education are we giving to our youth and youth in universities to make them political leaders. After some years, they will leave university and they will become a fundamental part of the society. I don't think that politics just for politics or education just for education is a good tool if it is not related with principles and values and what we expect from the society, what we expect from the democracy, what we expect for our future leaders. Leaders not only in politics but also in enterprise, in our communities, in every aspect of our lives. So I guess we cannot have good leaders if we not making our youth, and in our countries, youth is the most important section of the demographic space. So I don't know, but in Ecuador, is like 40% of all the electoral votes are cast by people between 16 and 30 years old. So I guess what I am saying is that youth should be formed in politics, not in a memoristic way, but by participating in public spaces, by participating in programs that allows them to join their communities and to make some efforts understanding that community. In Brazil, for instance, there's this program where youth participate in and they are formed in leadership, and they are formed in their democratic values. Also in Ecuador, we have a program. It's mandatory for people in the last year of high school to assist every Saturday of that year to a special program. Is not just one thing, depending on reforestation and community values and community, community development, and some things that permit those youth become not only a leader as the prime minister or as a president in my country, but to allow them to have the skills to respond to their community. I think that if we give the youth the education they need to help them become leaders in democracy, in liberty, and we will be giving them better tools than the ones we had when we went to school.
Thank you, Andrés. We are almost on the verge of the final round because we've been given 10 more minutes. So,
Okay. Questions, maybe?
if you want to add just for a minute or so. All right.
I just want to add one more point. Why sometimes people become so passive and then leaders do whatever they want. There is a leadership concept called paternalistic leadership or management, meaning that the leader acts like a parent, and then others are children, they just obey. Whatever the leader does is fine. Then sometimes later people find that the leader is doing this and that, now there is nothing we could do. Similar kind of portrait I have seen from somewhere, which says company rule. There are two rules only. Rule number 1 is boss is always right. Rule number 2, if you think boss is wrong, look at rule number 1. So rule number 1 is boss is always right. So if people are passive and people are not independent and have the liberty to raise their voice, governments will be like the company rule, meaning that government is always right. Rule number 2, if you think government is wrong, look at rule number 1. They can enjoy if people are not really empowered. That is why, as we are saying, the right education should be provided. Because for the people who really want to misuse power, they wish that people are not aware of their rights. Then it will be easy to fool them and mistreat them.
Andrés?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I want to thank you for following us here, because when somebody speaks about education, it's easy to lose the subject, because education for the people who work at education, like we do, is everything. You can find education everywhere, and it's quite challenging to talk about it, because sometimes you can miss the important points, but not because the points you are talking about, they are not important. It's because in education, financing education curricula, education for liberty, every point is important in education. So I guess what I am trying to say here is that what we believe, what I do believe, is that the most important right a person has is education. Is the right that allows everyone to exercise their other rights. You can't understand your right to healthcare if you don't have education. You can't understand your right to live if you don't have education. You can't understand the obligations, as you said, Mr. Ahmed, of the government, and where to put the limits to our governors if we don't have education. So education is the most important right, at least for me, and it's quite challenging to talk about it in these forums because every single point is important. I was pointing everything what you said, and I want to speak about it, but we can be here at least for 3 more days. So thank you very much.
Very good example. The power of education for democracy is seen by Bangladesh. Just 3 months before, university students, they initiated, they believe that what is happening is not right. So it's time to raise their voice, or more than raising the voice, until they show their power to the government, that just any government cannot do anything for the society against the will of the people. The question is why this has initiated from the university students. Because university students are educated, they know, they understand what are the rights. They have the liberty to raise their voice. I think that's a living example how powerful education is. If they could not have initiated it, still the situation would be same. That is why education is important, and education is not important if the leaders just really want to rule as dictators. So it's better not to provide education, especially human rights. Should not be, it should be a secret. Should not tell the people you have this right or that right, so then people will find it easy. But still, we know that, as it says, the education is a pillar for human rights, democracy, and also justice. I hope that these young people sitting in this room would get some insights from us, and you will think about more to utilize education to strengthen human rights, democracy. It's really nice meeting with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Suvojit, you want to add something more?
I mean, I've been.
Your final words.
I'd rather have a question for the audience, if anybody would like to answer. That is, since I have been talking about digital literacy and, how to block this disinformation and misinformation. So I'd be very keen to know if there is any mechanism in Bangladesh, like we have alt news in India, checking these facts, and figures, and how it's affecting our rights, and particularly human rights, how the democracy flow, the government's orders, etc., and misinformation. So, is there any mechanism in Bangladesh or any organization in Bangladesh which is working to check these misinformation campaign in the social media and elsewhere? So, could you tell me about it, any of you? Any idea like how Bangladesh is dealing with misinformation? Governmental level or non-governmental level? Anybody would like to answer that?
This is Al Mahmoud, student of the Department of Public Administration, Jahangirnagar University. Bangladesh have a voluntary group that's called Cyber 71. And this group try to identify the news is correct or not. Actually, when rumor is spread, they try to find out that it's actually true or false. Thank you.
Well, we are in our last minute or so. Just with reference to the deliberation of His Excellency Mr. Ahmed, I'd like to just add a little. When there is a coup d'etat in Thailand, the regime which came into power, they decided to put a ban on the study of political science in different universities. Political science was considered a dangerous domain for the people who took over. So there is a merit in what Mr. Ahmed has told us. So since we have paucity of time, I would not sort of continue the session. You're most welcome to sort of join us in tea and other informal opportunities to interact. And without much further ado, I'd like to thank you again.